Well, thank you for watching Midget Zombie Takeover, and I'd like to thank Indie Horror TV for showing the film. And I am Glenn Berggoetz. I am the writer-director of the film, and I appreciate all of you watching. Hopefully you'll have some questions for me. And just a little bit about the film. We shot the film for $2,000, and we shot it over the course of a couple weekends, and we had a whole lot of fun. Hopefully that came through in the film. And we realized it is some pretty goofy comedy, and but we had a lot of fun shooting it. And some people have asked me, why Midget Zombie Takeover, and the comedy in there and the dialogue and so forth. And I basically make films that I hope I will enjoy. I put in the comedies I make, I put in the things that make me laugh, and hopefully they make other people laugh as well. I realize sometimes they don't, and you can see that in the reviews we've gotten for Midget Zombie Takeover. They have ranged from everything to comparing it to a Quentin Tarantino film to some critics saying it's the worst I've ever seen, and that's going to happen. But we had a lot of fun making it. And the genesis of the film, how it came about, is about 3 or 4 years ago, I was talking with the CEO at a distribution company, and he said, Glenn, he said, I can sell 2 kinds of films. He said, if you ever make a film with women in bikinis in it, I can sell it. Or if you ever make a film with zombies in it, I can sell it. And being the genius that I am, it only took me about 3 years or so to figure out, hey, I can put those 2 things together, and hit on both of those aspects at one time. But I didn't just want to, do, a zombie film. There have been so many zombie films done, and I wanted to put a different twist on it, something I hadn't seen before. And so one day I was talking with my Christine Summers, and we were throwing ideas back and forth. What can we do with the zombies? And at one point, Christine said, well, why don't you make them little people? And I thought, hey, that's a pretty good idea. I like that. So, yeah, I tossed some ideas around. Eventually got around to writing the script. That's how we got Midget Zombie Takeover. And just so you know, and some theaters have refused to show the film. We've been shown in a number of theaters across the U.S., and we were shown in London last week at the Roxy Bar and Screen. And some people, said, why did you use the word midget in there? Because some theaters have said, hey, we would have shown it, but, the word midget is offensive. And our actual working title for the film was Little Zombie Takeover. And you may have noticed in the film, Steve McKay, who played Amanda, the lead in the film, at one point, she says, we have to find out a way to survive the little zombie takeover, because that was the title of the film as we were shooting. And on the last day of the shoot, though, which was the only day we had the little people on set, the zombies, Travis Green, who kind of played the head zombie, he said, why don't you just call us midgets? He said, we're midgets, that's our name. It's not an offensive term. And he went on to explain that a very small percentage of little people have a problem with the word midget. And he said the other 95% or so have no problem with it, and they use it all the time, and it's not considered a derogatory term. So he said, I want you to use the word midget in the title. So we respected Travis's wishes. So here's the first question. There weren't a lot of midgets in the film. Was it difficult to find midget actors? It was exceedingly difficult to find midget actors. We shot the film in the summer of 2012 over the course of 2 weekends in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I went about casting the film in my normal way. My previous films I had all shot in Denver, Colorado. And I have pretty much the same cast and crew people I use over and over in various incarnations and in combinations. And so I just send emails to people, say, hey, you want to be in the film? Okay, sure. And we get things cast that way. But it was the first film I'd shot in Indiana. So I started posting on Craigslist in Fort Wayne, where the film was shot, and looking for cast members, crew members. And when I would post for little people to play the zombies, I was getting 0 response. So I started posting on Craigslist in South Bend, Indiana, Toledo, Ohio, Indianapolis, Indiana, still no response, Chicago, Cincinnati. I was really extending myself out, and I was getting no response at all. Eventually, I had a husband and wife call me, and they lived about an hour away from Fort Wayne, and they said they were going to do it. At the last minute, they backed out. And however, I got a call one day from Pinkerton Xyloma and of Dead Man's Carnival out of Milwaukee, and he'd seen the Craigslist ad in Chicago. And Pinkerton gave me a call one day, and he said, "Hey," he said, "I got a guy I think would be great for your film. He's in Dead Man's Carnival. His name's Travis Green, and I've talked to him, and he'd love to be in the film." So I spoke with Travis, and he decided to come on board. He came down. Travis lives north of Milwaukee, so he had, I believe, about a 7-hour drive to get to set, and he had a great time shooting. We had a great time working with Travis. So he was the one true little person in the film. The other 5 people who played the zombies are technically midgets, because I've seen where a 4'10" or shorter is technically a midget. And they were all shorter than 4'10", but they were all, 4'8", 4'9". So they were short people, and but not what we typically think of as a midget. We got a comment here. Where north of Milwaukee? That's my old stomping grounds. I don't know. I can't remember exactly where it is. Travis is from. I believe about an hour north of Milwaukee, in that area. And so he had quite a drive getting to Fort Wayne, and but we were thrilled to have him be part of the film. And when we had our world premiere in Winchester, Virginia, at the Alamo Drafthouse, the owner there, Steve Narangis, brought us in for our world premiere, and it was fantastic. It was part of the Zombie TV Horror or Freakend Festival, Freakend Horror Fest, and yeah, Travis made the trip down, and my gosh, he was the hit of the night when we had our premiere. We had a great screening. The crowd went nuts and all, and afterwards we did a Q&A with the crowd. Women were hitting on Travis, and then we went out in the lobby, and for hours we were out there talking with fans, and Travis was quite the hit there. And you might wonder, how we go about making a film for $2,000. And that's become a bit of a niche of mine, making micro-budget films. I did see where the one film topped the box office this weekend with Ethan Hawke, The Purge. It's considered a micro-budget film because they made it for only $3 million. We made Midget Zombie Takeover for $2,000. And it's the 6th feature film I've shot and completed. And we have a 7th one, The Ghosts of Johnson Woods. We're starting on the edit of that. We have it all shot. But the most I've ever spent to make a film is $2,000. I've spent as little as $800 to make a feature film. And if you have any particular questions about that, feel free to type those in. Or if you want to learn more about it, I actually had a book published last October from the Hal Leonard Corporation, part of their Quick Guide series of books. Here's a peek you can take at it, The Independent Filmmaker's Guide. Make your feature film for $2,000. If you want to get the book, go to Amazon, and you can certainly purchase it there. And it will tell you basically everything I know about making a film on a small budget. Next question in, what film festivals has the film been a part of, and how has the reception been at the festival? We actually, typically the route, independent films will go is the film festival route, and then possibly after that, getting some notoriety there, they might get screened in some theaters. And we've done it the exact opposite with Midget Zombie Takeover. What happened is, I had some connections with the Alamo Drafthouse in Winchester, Virginia, and Steve Narangis there, and connections at other theaters who had shown some of our previous films. We had 2 other films prior to Midget Zombie Takeover that got limited theatrical releases. The one was The Worst Movie Ever, that's the title of it, and the other is To Die Is Hard, which was a comedy in the vein of a Naked Gun film, where we lampooned action films. And when we had Midget Zombie Takeover completed, before going to the festival route, I contacted these theaters. And so we got the film booked pretty quickly in some theaters. And basically, we were editing. Editor Eric Lassie was editing up till the last minute to get the film done for our world premiere in February in Virginia. And so the festival route, you typically have to submit months and months in advance. You have to wait months and months to find out. And so we haven't actually screened in a festival yet. I have submitted the film to 4 or 5 festivals. The Phenom Film Fest just contacted us recently and asked us to submit and waived the entry fee. Thank you very much, Phenom Film Fest in Louisiana. And so, yeah, we'll see. Maybe we'll get picked up by a couple of festivals. If not, hey, we've screened in, 7 or 8 theaters in the U.S., and again, we've screened in London. Next question here. Give us a little more info about some of your other films and any chance some of these could show on indie horror TV. Well, I haven't done horror films before. This is really my first horror film, Midget Zombie Takeover. Our film, The Worst Movie Ever, which was our film that came out in 2011, we billed it as tagline for it was, it may be the worst movie ever, but it's the best sci-fi action drama horror comedy musical you've ever seen, because the film is a mess of plots and dialogue and all. And so yeah, it's got a tiny bit of horror, comedic horror in there, and but our other films like To Die Is Hard is a comedy, Therapist is a comedy, as well as Separate Checks. I've done pretty much all comedies. However, we do have a psychological thriller slash horror film that's just going to be hitting theaters later this month. It's called Evil Intent. Unfortunately, we already have a distribution deal for it, so I don't know that we'll be able to get it on Indie Horror TV. But the film is making its world premiere June 29th as a midnight movie at the Cinema Center in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And it looks like we'll also be getting it screened in Phoenix. And we have a couple small theater chains, one in New England, one in Michigan, and one in Nevada and Utah, who have asked for the film and information about it. So hopefully we'll get that film booked into some theater chains, get some good things going with that. Thank you for the congratulations. And our next film, though, that's coming out is The Ghosts of Johnson Woods, and that's a psychological thriller as well. We shot it late last summer after we shot Midget Zombie Takeover, and we should be getting on the edit of that sometime in the near future, so it should be ready for next year. And The Ghosts of Johnson Woods, hopefully it'll be right for Indie Horror TV. It actually started out as a dark comedy, and as I kept reworking the script, it got a little darker and darker until after a while it's like, wow, this really isn't a dark comedy. This is more of a psychological thriller. And there hopefully a few comedic moments come through in it, but the film does take a very dark turn as it progresses. So yeah, that's a psychological thriller. And with the attention Midget Zombie Takeover, To Die Is Hard, The Worst Movie Ever, and Evil Intent have been getting, I've already had some distribution companies contacting me about The Ghosts of Johnson Wood. So hopefully we'll be able to get that in some theaters, maybe get it on Indie Horror TV, pick up a distributor for it, and get that out there making the rounds. And one of the things I was happy with The Ghosts of Johnson Woods is we were able to reuse Matt Goosehurst, who played Billy in Midget Zombie Takeover. The Ghosts of Johnson Woods is a very small cast. There are only 4 cast members in it, and 90% of the lines are delivered by Matt Goosehurst and Hayden Harvey. They're the 2 stars of the film, and I've worked with Hayden a number of times on other films, The Worst Movie Ever and To Die Is Hard. And so yes, if you loved Billy in Midget Zombie Takeover, keep an eye out for The Ghosts of Johnson Woods, because Matt Goosehurst is the star of that one as well. Next question coming in. So shooting horror films, was this something you originally wanted to do, since most of your films seem to fall into different genres, or was this something you sort of evolved into doing as time went on? Yeah, I make the films that are piquing my interest at the time. I am, seeking an agent, especially for all the scripts I have. I have 14 other completed scripts, and my scripts reflect my mood at the time. I have mostly comedies. I have some straight-up horror films in there. One's called Savage Evil that I recently got a production company asked to see. Actually, I've had 2 production companies look at it recently. And I did I have a romantic comedy script mixed in there. I have some pretty much straight up dramas as well. And it's pretty much the mood I'm in at the time, though I would say, 3/4 of the time I'm in the comedy mood. And that was a lot of fun with Midget Zombie Takeover, to do the horror but have a lot of comedy in there. We are already looking on doing a sequel, hopefully, to Midget Zombie Takeover 2. And I would like to get, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the most I've ever spent to make a film is $2,000. And our goal for Midget Zombie Takeover 2 is to raise at least $60,000. And I have no idea how easy that might be, how difficult it might be. But we'd like to make it a lot more horror-based. And still have some comedic elements in there, but really try to amp up the blood and the limbs getting torn off, brains exploding, and which we weren't able to do with Midget Zombie Takeover because we just didn't have the budget. Thankfully, Dennis Parent came on to do the makeup, the zombie makeup, and for $100 he was able to do all that he did. And well, the blood there was mostly Stubbs barbecue sauce that we used, and but Dennis did a great job making the zombies look fantastic, and he had to work so quickly because we only had the zombies on set for the one day. And so we had to start bringing them in early, and Dennis had to start getting to work on their makeup. And then we had, as some of them were still getting their makeup on, we'd bring the one or two who already had their makeup and shoot some scenes with them. And it ended up being a lot of fun. It worked out really well. A number of the reviews we've gotten for the film have commented on how good the makeup looked for a small budget film like that. So kudos to Dennis Parent. And if you're making a horror film and you're anywhere in Michigan or Indiana or Illinois or whatever, look up Dennis Parent. He's the guy to do the work for you. The next question here. You have a few films in distribution. Can you give our viewers a little background on how that process has worked out for you, and maybe just delve a little bit into that? Absolutely. The distribution process, well, first of all, let me state that I love the writing and directing aspect of making films. The producing part, I'm not such a huge fan of. I'd rather stick to the more artistic sides or creative sides to the process. But I have to do the producing because, our films bring in a little money here and there, but certainly not enough that I can bring on, a full-time producer to handle that. So I have to deal with the theaters, the distribution companies, and things like that. As far as getting the films into theaters, all 4 films of ours that have been in theaters or will be hitting theaters, I've done all that distribution myself. I got online a few years ago and looked up every independent theater I could come across online and tried to track down a contact person and an email address for that theater. And I just spent hours and hours and hours and days contacting these people, sending them a link to the trailers for the film, asking if I could mail them a screener or send them a link to the film that was on a private YouTube page, which I highly suggest you do that. That'll save you a whole lot of printing, DVD printing costs and mailing costs, envelope costs. And so over the years, I've developed some relationships with some independent theaters around the country who are open to at least looking at my films and considering them for a screening or two. When it comes to things like DVDs, the online stuff, I've been able to do a little online stuff of my own, as you can see, with Indie Horror TV. And but to really get things out there in foreign distribution, whether it's DVDs or theaters or whatever, I've had to bring in distributors. And the way I've gotten distributors is the same way I've gotten the film into theaters. I just had to spend hour after hour online looking up distribution companies that look like they're handling the kinds of films I'm making, and contact them, send them a link to the trailer. Hopefully they want to see the film. And for those of you who are getting into the process of making films and wanting to find a distributor or get your film into theaters, just so you know, probably, 4 out of 5 distributors or I'll take that back. At least 9 out of 10 theaters or distributors will never even acknowledge you contacted them. Okay, let alone send you an email back saying no thanks. And for example, about 2 months ago, I thought, well, I need to start looking to get a distributor for Midget Zombie Takeover. And I didn't have a lot of time. The one day I thought, well, let me spend a couple hours, see if I can find 20 different distributors who have handled zombie films of some sort, or horror films, and I'll contact them, get the ball rolling. Out of the 20 distribution companies I contacted that day, in the 2 months since, I've heard back from exactly one of them, and they just sent an email back, hit reply, said, no thanks, we have our catalog full right now. So don't let that deter you. You just got to keep plugging along. And my thought is, I can get 1,000 no's, but it just takes that one right person or right production company, right distributor, or right whoever to possibly change my life, or at least get the film out there and get people seeing it. So don't be disheartened there. And be careful with the distributors. I've had some awful experiences with distributors. The 2 I'll point out is, 1, I've read this over and over, never give any upfront fees to a distributor. And because some of them will say, well, you got to give us $10,000 or whatever. I've heard as much as $20,000 because we'll incur a lot of expenses at first, and we need the film to cover those, and then we'll give you a good split down the road. And I had one company just kept schmoozing me for the worst movie ever, because the worst movie ever set the all-time box office record for the worst opening weekend in history. So we got a lot of attention right away for it. We're getting attention from all over the world. And this distribution company had 4 different guys from the distributor call me over and over, gosh, we got to get this film, And they wanted $10,000 to take it on. And I said, there's just no way. I don't even have that money. I make my films for $1,000, $2,000. I don't have $10,000 laying around. And eventually they agreed to take $5,000, and I paid it in increments. And they schmoozed me. I bought it. I shouldn't have, because once they got the money, I basically never heard from them again. And so I had to take on a different distributor. I was able to get out of the deal and take on a different distributor for the worst movie ever. The other bad deal I got is the very first film I completed and got a distributor for was a film called Therapist. And I love the film. It stars Greg Niemer, Ben Whitehair, Giovanna Leah. And it has a great cast. It's an ensemble cast. It's about a psychologist, a therapist, who's really angry, and he takes out his issues on his patients, and it's Therapist, Pissed. And I got a distributor for it pretty quickly, because, I don't know, I think it's a really funny film, and some other people do as well. And I got the contract from the distributor, and the terms were really good. I was getting 75% of any monies coming in, which is a pretty good deal, actually a very good deal with a lot of distributors. And it said they had rights in perpetuity, lifetime rights. And being, the Nimrod that I was and am on many occasions still, I thought, wow, they're really committed to this film. They want to keep it forever. They're really devoted to it. And I only found out later, after signing Therapist and To Die Is Hard, separate checks, and Evil Intent over to them, because they liked all my films, that is really stupid to go with lifetime rights. You should look for something that's typically about 2 to 5 years. And thankfully for me, the company, because I tried to get the rights back because they had the films for a couple of years and did not get a single deal, but they went bankrupt. And so I just thought the rights would come back to me. And what I found out was, no, they're an asset. The company's going to try to sell them off. Thankfully, I had one guy at that distributor who was a huge fan of me and the films. And going back and forth in some emails with him, he said, look through I think it was a 37-page contract. He said, we breached it in one part. He said, I can't tell you what part it was, but if you can find that breach, point it out to us. We can go through the breach of contract process, and you can get the rights back. So I took a number of hours, read every word of the contract for the first time ever, and yes, I found that breach. I was able to get out of that contract, and since then, I've gotten Goliath Promotions to take those films on. Maureen Cooper heads up Goliath, and she's done a fantastic job with them. She's just landed the films in quite a few places. We've got some hotel pay-per-view deals for them, VOD deals, video on demand. She's got some streaming deals for them. So, yeah, things are looking up for those films. So those are my 2 cautionary tales. But basically, you just have to bust your butt and spend a ton of time, on the internet, looking up distribution companies, looking up contact people there, find their email addresses. Don't call them. That's not a good way to go about it. An email is a much safer way to go about contacting those companies. Let's see, have you been able to make decent return on distribution deals? There are a lot of distributors that we heard sign deals and don't end up paying the filmmakers, using funny math to state the film hasn't made any money back on. I have heard lots of stories like that, and I guess I have to wait and see. Therapist was first signed to a deal in 2009 or 2009, I believe. Maybe it was 2010. I think it was 2009. And again, Therapists, separate checks, To Die Is Hard and Evil Intent were with that same distribution company for a number of years. And it's only been in the last maybe year that Goliath has had the rights to those films and has started making deals. And most distributors pay once every 6 months. So yes, even when you do get a deal, well, first off, when you get a distributor, it doesn't mean you've attained the holy grail. There's still a lot of work to do on the distributor's part. And so, yeah, it doesn't mean you got it made and, millions of dollars are going to be flowing in. However, it's a big step towards that. And but most distributors pay once every 6 months, and so yeah, you get a deal here or there, and not all deals are huge. For example, Maureen at Goliath was telling me that a little while back that she was working on a South Korean VOD deal for the 4 films that she represents of ours. And I was really excited. I'm like, wow, South Korea, video on demand and all. Well, she ended up telling me, don't get too excited because it's a one-time flat fee. Don't get any residuals or anything. And by the time, with exchange rate and Maureen taking her percentage of the deal, that I would make $167 per film. And so, yeah, it wouldn't have been a huge amount anyway. And so, yeah, it's going to take a while. Even if we did, get that deal, in most cases, it's going to take a number of months for them to send the money to the distributor. And then if it's just past, one of the 6-month windows, I might have to wait another 5 months. So it can be, theoretically 8 to 12 months before you start seeing money from those things. I have read a lot of horror stories, though, yes, about distributors using the creative math. And even if some big deals are made, you get some foreign TV sales or something like that, a deal for $140,000 with a Spanish TV network or something like that. Yeah, suddenly with all the paperwork and all and the mathematics, the filmmaker is left with very little or sometimes even nothing. And so, we just keep our fingers crossed as filmmakers that we find those good distributors out there. As far as I can tell, Maureen Cooper there at Goliath is fantastic. And we just signed, Midget Zombie Takeover and The Worst Movie Ever. We've signed with MCTV Continuum Films and with Danny Torres there. And at least so far, Danny has been fantastic. And so hopefully, yeah, we start up a great relationship with Continuum Films and Danny Torres, and we get some nice returns down the road that allow us to make, Midget Zombie Takeover 2, or, I have these 14 other scripts I would love to find an agent for to help me to sell them. That would require more money. Maybe we get some great distribution action going, I get some money coming in, and, I can put, a couple $100,000 into making some of those films. Next question here. Have you been able to make decent, sorry about that. What inspired you to become a filmmaker? And is there any film or director that really motivated you to want to make films? Yeah, I never wanted to be a filmmaker. For years and years and years, I wanted to be a writer. I started writing in college. I wrote my first short story and all. And so all through the 90s, I was writing short stories. I was writing novels. And I ended up having 4, maybe 5, I think it was 4 short stories published in various magazines. The highlight was getting paid $25 for one of them because, yeah, short story writing is not a way to make a lot of money, I found. and I wrote 3 novels, none of which were published because, let's face it, they were awful. And but I always wanted to be a writer. And what I found was in short stories, I never felt like I had quite enough space to say everything I wanted to, but when it came to novels, they were too long and I was losing momentum as the book went on. And I thought, well, I don't know, a screenplay is in between. It's pretty much a novella, about 15, 16,000 words, compared to a 3,000 word short story or a 100,000 word novel. And I thought, that might fit my writing style better. So in the late 90s, I started writing scripts. And the first script I wrote is called The Secret Thoughts of Waiters. And I continued to write scripts and more. And back in, I guess it was October, November of 2006, I believe it was, I met with Andrew Welchel. And Andrew, we had coffee together, and Andrew was a book agent, but he had worked at Disney in Hollywood for quite a while. And we were talking about various things. I mentioned, I have all these scripts, but I can't even get anyone in Hollywood to look at them, let alone read them and tell me they stink or no thanks. And Andrew said, well, why don't you just start making your own films? That's probably going to be the way that you can get some notoriety, get noticed, and do something with your scripts. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know how to make films. I've never made a film. And so I went to the library and I got the Guerrilla Filmmaker's Handbook, which if you've seen it, it's, this thick. It's, I don't know, the copy I had was 780 pages or something. It's a big, huge book. And I started reading it. and it was overwhelming. It was just way too much information. And they're talking about, what you need to do for a $50,000 budget, a $200,000 budget, $500,000 budget. And let's face it, as independent filmmakers, I mean, most of us are lucky to have $5,000 to work with, let alone, $500,000 or $200,000. And they're talking about key grips and second assistant directors and all this. And to this day, I don't know what a key grip is or a gaff or whatever. We keep our film shoots simple. We have a camera guy and a sound guy. We almost never even use a lighting guy. We just use whatever lights are around in the house. And yeah, that's what we use for lighting. We keep it simple. And it keeps our costs down. So anyway, I started reading the Guerrilla Filmmaker's Handbook, felt completely overwhelmed, and I thought, well, maybe I can just do this simpler. Maybe I might be completely naive and stupid, but I'm going to try to do this in a simpler manner and keep the crew to a minimum, keep the cast to a minimum, and the locations to a minimum. And we made my first short film, which is called Bad Movies, Good Showers, and Civil Engineers. It's available on YouTube, and you can watch it. Just enter my name, Glenn Berggoetz, on YouTube, and you'll come across it. It's a 19-minute short film, and we shot the whole thing in one day, and not even a whole day. We started at 7 in the morning. We were done by 3:30 or 4 in the afternoon, and it actually was pretty easy. And that's how I keep making my films. And I never intended to be a filmmaker, but I found it was fun. It was interesting. It was a challenge, and it's not as difficult as a lot of the books would lead you to believe, and that's why I wrote the Independent Filmmaker's Guide, for those people out there like me who don't have $250,000 to make their film and want to keep it simple. And, instead of, setting aside 5 years and your lifetime savings and going in debt with credit cards and loans or whatever, or borrowing money from friends and relatives to make your film, take 6 or 8 months, write your script, make your film, get it out there, and, just save up $1,500 or so and make your film. So that's how I got into filmmaking. And let me see, I'm trying to think what else here. There was another part of that question. What motivated me to want to make films? Now the motivation is just that it's a lot of fun, and I would like to get the films out there enough that I can make a living doing it. I teach part-time as a college professor. I'm teaching at Arapahoe Community College in Littleton, Colorado right now to help pay the bills. And hopefully eventually, with what Maureen Cooper's doing at Goliath Promotions and what Danny Torres at Continuum Films will be doing with our, Midget Zombie Takeover and the Worst Movie Ever. Hopefully enough money comes in that I can start making films for a living. The next question here, have you ever had anything crazy happen on any of your sets? Any injuries, any police interaction? Not really. Typically, we're always laughing. For example, too, I made a very serious short film called Guernica Still Burning. And that's another film. It's a 22-minute short that you can watch on YouTube in its entirety. It's a very serious stream of consciousness film. A guy's trying to figure out what he believes. And but, basically, it was 4 people were involved in the whole film. I was the director, writer-director. Jason W. Griffith was the star. Stuart Goldstein was the co-star. And Alan Day Green shot and edited it. And my gosh, we just laughed and laughed and laughed through the whole thing, even though it was a very serious film. And we had to get the next take, or okay, get the giggles out and all, let's shoot this scene. And so if you go on YouTube to see Guernica Still Burning, and again, it'd probably be easier to just enter my name in, Glenn Berggoetz, and you'll find it. You might be surprised to find out that we had a ton of fun shooting it. I'd never had any police interaction. One of the things, excuse me, that I mentioned in the Independent Filmmaker's Guide is I never get insurance or permission or talk to the police or anything. We do guerrilla filmmaking. I either find houses or apartments, or sometimes, like with Tadia's Heart, I was teaching at Metropolitan State University in Denver at the time, and we used the building that my office was in, and we shot on the weekends in the summer, 2 weekends in the summer. And so I don't worry about getting permission from anyone, or signing release forms, or getting insurance or anything like that. But the one day when we were shooting at Metro State with Tadia's Heart, a police officer came up, a campus security police officer, and because we had a little motor scooter we used in the film for a few scenes, And we had pulled it up on a sidewalk, which it had a license plate on it, so it's not allowed to be on sidewalks. And so campus security came up, hey, what's going on here and all, and they were just getting their stuff out to write a ticket, and I quick ran over, and I told them, we were shooting a film and all, and so they said, well, did you get permission for this? And as I always do, I lied and said, oh, yeah, I got permission. And they said, okay, then, well, carry on. And so I've never gotten into trouble doing that. I guess theoretically, at some point I might. Of course, if we get doing bigger budget films, I will make sure we do have the proper permission, because it's one thing to get, a $1,500 film, shut down for a while you try to work something out, but it'd be totally different to have a, $1 million budget and you have the film shut down because, not taking care of some things like that. But when you're doing the micro budget films, for $1,000, $2,000, don't worry about that. Your whole budget can get taken up by getting insurance or paying permits to shoot something. I know at one point we've done a sketch comedy TV show called Driving with Our Eyes Shut that is getting edited right now. And at one of the sketches, we were shooting at a public park, and we looked into getting permission for that, and they wanted $500 and proof of insurance and all. I eventually just said, let's ignore them. We'll just go out there, shoot, and be done with it. And yeah, no one cared. We went out there, shot for an hour or so, and we were done. And yeah, no one cared. Let's see. I thought one sort of interesting part of Midget Zombie Takeover was that you included the computer programs you used to edit the film in the credits. Was there a reason you chose to include that? Yeah. Eric Lassie was the editor, post-producer, handled all the sound stuff. When we premiered the film in Winchester, Virginia, at the Alamo Draft House, we did a Q&A afterwards. Steve Narangis had us go down, in front of the screen and talk with the crowd. And while most of the people, are wanting to ask, cast members, oh, this or that, or ask me a question about the directing of the film or the writing of it or whatever, there were some people who were very much interested in the technical aspects. What did you shoot it on? What did you do audio on? What was the editing done on, and things like that. And so eventually, because when we had our world premiere, we actually didn't have our final edit. We had let the crowd vote on a scene, on how we were going to edit the badminton scene, which is unbelievably long, the longest badminton scene in cinema history. I'm going to say, I can't imagine there's a longer one. And so when Eric went back in to change that scene around a tiny bit, the crowd wanted us to keep it long. I'll just tell you that much. I thought they'd want us to shorten it down to about 30 seconds. They said, no, keep it at 2 minutes. So we just trimmed a few seconds off it. But a number of people asked questions about the technical aspects of the making of the film. And so Eric said, hey, is it okay if I just put that stuff in the closing credits? I said, oh, absolutely. And so we just kind of did that, or Eric did that, as a favor to those people who are into the technical aspects of filmmaking. And myself, I know almost nothing about the technical aspects. I have to bring in smart people like Eric Lassie, like Alan Day Green, like Nick Falls, like Orion Metzger, people who know things about cameras and editing and sound stuff. And yeah, I know very little about that. I guess it would be cool to learn some of that, but my thought is it would take away from my time on some of the other creative aspects, the writing of scripts. It would also take away a lot of my producing, a lot of time away from the producing I have to do at this point, the marketing the films and trying to find distributors, trying to get the films into theaters. And so that's why we did that. That's why I haven't learned the technical aspects. Plus, I did a tiny bit of editing years ago on a small project, and I found it to be very interesting, but it was also extremely time-consuming. And at times we've turned out 2 feature films in a year, and 4 in 2 years. I mean, we can keep bringing out the feature films. And if I was to be doing the editing, I wouldn't have the time to be doing the writing of the next script and the pre-production, getting the cast together, the crew together, because it would take so much time to do the editing. And for those of you who are independent filmmakers, if you can find a good editor or two, keep using them. They are abused, unfortunately, in micro-budget filmmaking because they have to put so much time in, and it would be fantastic to be able to write them out a check for $100,000 for all the time they have to put in. It's just not possible in micro-budget filmmaking. I will say when you budget your film, I always pay the editor the most. And cast and crew members, a lot of times all I can afford to pay them are $50 to basically cover gas money. Sometimes not even that. Sometimes only 20 or 25, depending on how much money I have around. And but the distributors, if I'm paying the cast members $50 each, the distributors, the editors, if I'm paying the cast members $50 each, I'll pay the editor probably $400 or $500 because they have to put in so much time. And even at that, they're working for probably turns out 1/10 of minimum wage for the amount of time they have to put in. The next question here. I know you have a book that covers most of this, but if you had to give an aspiring filmmaker one piece of advice before they get started, what would it be? It would be to keep things as simple as possible. Keep the number of locations in your script to a very minimum. If you watch my films, you'll notice that Midget Zombie Takeover, the whole film was shot in one house and the yard outside of it. To Die is Hard, 90% of it was shot in one building, the other 10% in one apartment. Therapist, pretty much all of it was shot in one apartment and one house. With your crew, keep it simple. Get a camera guy, get an editor, sometimes they're the same person, and get someone to hold the boom microphone. For separate checks, I did the boom microphone, okay? It was the whole film, Separate Checks, was me with the boom and directing, Nick Falls doing the editing and camera work, and the stars, Libby Baker and Greg Niemer. We made an entire feature film with 4 people. Keep it simple, keep the location simple, your cast and crew as simple as possible. Midget Zombie Takeover was the biggest cast I'd ever had, but then I quickly followed that up with The Ghost of Johnson Woods that has a total of 4 cast members. So that would be my one big piece of advice, keep it as simple as possible. Next question. We found that many of the filmmakers we know can't pay a cast well, but make up for it by feeding them well. And I don't even really do that. I typically go to a dollar store and buy $40 or $50 worth of dollar food, get a bunch of chips, cookies, granola bars, and I mix in some fresh, bananas or whatever as well. Get some soda, Gatorade, things like that. I guess I feed them a good quantity of food, not necessarily the highest quality food, and but yes, that is one thing that will keep the people in your cast and crew going and happy, is to make sure there's food and beverage on set. Another way to do that is I try to stagger the call times. With Midget Zombie Takeover, pretty much the entire cast and crew slept at the house we were renting at the time, because most of them came from out of town, a lot of people from Chicago or Northwest Ohio or Lafayette, Indiana. And but like with The Worst Movie Ever, I pretty much staggered all the call times. So basically the only person who was on set all the time, it seemed like, was Kasha Fawcett. And of course we shot the whole film in one weekend, but Kasha Fawcett had to be there pretty much all the time just because I couldn't work it out any other way. But pretty much everyone else all the cast members were only on set for 2 to 5 hours a day each day, because if you figure out ways to stagger those and work people together. My next big project, hopefully we have The Ghost of Johnson Woods coming out next year. And in 2 weeks, though, we're shooting a reality TV show pilot. It's called Bigfoot Psychic. And yes, you heard that correctly, Bigfoot Psychic. And we know a woman who has psychic abilities with Bigfoots. We're going to do a reality TV show based on that. And so hopefully, we'll get that shot in a couple of weeks, get that edited together, and hopefully in a year or so, you will turn on the TV someday and see a reality show called Bigfoot Psychic. If you do, I would hope you will watch it. Again, I'm starting to work on a script for Midget Zombie Takeover 2. So keep an eye out, hopefully, for that. We might do a Kickstarter campaign there to hopefully raise at least $60,000 to shoot that film. We have Evil Intent, our psychological thriller / horror film, which is getting some really good reviews, making its world theatrical premiere at the Cinema Center in Fort Wayne, Indiana on June 29th as a midnight movie. And again, look for it hopefully in New England, in Arizona, Phoenix area, also Utah and Nevada, hopefully if we can lock down that theatrical deal, possibly in Michigan. And and like that, if you're interested in filmmaking, check out the Independent Filmmakers Guide. And we have a bunch of short films in their entirety on YouTube. We also have our trailers. If you just enter in my name, Glenn Berggoetz, will come up. The theaters in Michigan, it's a chain of 12 theaters. The question here is, where in Michigan? I'm in Ann Arbor. They're based out of Grand Rapids. and there are 12 of them spread throughout the state. I'm not sure exactly where all of them are. They're the Celebration Cinemas, I think it is, or Celebration Films. I think it's Celebration Cinemas, and there are 12 of them in Michigan. So yeah, hopefully we can get that deal worked out. Evil Intent will probably not be or screened in most theaters until September, October, because most theater chains already have their summer programming filled, and yeah, with all the big summer blockbusters. So it'll be a little while. You'll have to wait a little while to see those. I guess that will about wrap it up for tonight. Thank you so much for all of you who watched, and I appreciate the questions. And you can always contact me through Facebook. You can like our films on Facebook. We have Facebook fan pages set up on Facebook for our films. Give us a like, send me an email through there. And you're very welcome. I appreciate everyone watching. Thanks a bunch.